Hi, my name is Ben Freer. I'm an immigration lawyer for entrepreneurs. And today I'm going to discuss the E-2 visa for professional services businesses. In doing so, I'll explain why my professional services business absolutely would not have qualified for the E-2 visa when I initially set it up. So before I jump in, I'm going to talk about what I mean by professional services and give you a brief summary of the E-2 visa and its requirements. First of all, what do I mean when I say professional services? These types of businesses would include law practices, accounting services, marketing consultants, design and creative services, etc., etc. Basically, you can think of professional services as any service requiring specialized knowledge that a business would typically outsource. So what is the E-2 visa? For anyone who's not familiar with the E-2 visa and its requirements, it is a visa that enables foreign national entrepreneurs from certain countries to run a real and operating business in the US if they have made a substantial at-risk investment in that business and the business will create jobs. Now, there's some other requirements that you absolutely need to know if you decide to pursue this visa, but those are the major ones that you need to know for the purposes of this discussion. So with these requirements in mind, can entrepreneurs obtain E-2 visas for businesses that provide professional services? The answer is yes. A professional services business can absolutely qualify for the E-2 visa, but there is a catch. Professional services businesses can be cheap to set up, but you may have to set up your business differently than you would have initially planned to put yourself in a position to make a successful E-2 visa application. The best way to illustrate this point is to share my own modest startup story. I have a professional services business, and I did not have to apply for the E-2 visa. But let's imagine that I needed to apply for an E-2 visa to run my law practice. Had I tried to obtain an E-2 visa based on the business that I initially established, I would have been laughed out of the consulate. There is absolutely no way that I would have been approved for an E-2 visa. So I'm going to discuss the reasons why my E-2 visa application would have failed and explain how I would have done things differently had I been trying to position myself for a successful E-2 visa application. The first reason why my business would not have qualified for the E-2 visa is that my investment was way too small. For my business, the bulk of my investment consisted of a co-working membership, insurance, a Google business account, a domain for my website, web hosting, and business registration. The grand total for all this couldn't have been more than $750, which was great. I remember thinking that I was so grateful to live in a period of time when such a modest investment would be sufficient to create a real business. But if I was setting it up with an eye towards qualifying for the E-2 visa, I would have invested way more, since my paltry investment of $750 would not have come close to qualifying as a substantial investment. Had I started my business with the E-2 visa in mind, I would have invested in the following. Number one, office space. Instead of working from my wobbly kitchen table with my dog Bruno by my side, I would have invested in professional office space and furniture. Also, I would have prepaid for my office for at least 1 year. Depending on how fancy I wanted to get, this move would have boosted my investment by $15,000 to $20,000. Additionally, I would have spent on professional services. Instead of designing my own logo and creating my own website, I would have hired a branding agency and a web designer to complete these tasks. Also, instead of just having a vague idea of how I wanted my business to run and grow, I would have hired a professional business plan writer to get me on track. The grand total for these professional services would have easily reached $20,000. And last but not least, I would have spent more money on hardware. When I launched my practice, I had an old MacBook Air and an iPhone with a cracked screen. This worked just fine, but had I needed to up my investment, I would have gladly purchased a new phone and a laptop. Also, I would have purchased a desktop computer for my fancy new office space, along with a scanner and a printer. These expenditures easily could have increased my initial investment by $5,000 to $7,000. Through all this lavish spending, I could have boosted my initial investment from a laughable $750 to an estimated $40,750 to $47,750. Tack on an additional $10,000 to $15,000 to cover initial operating expenses, and I would have a respectable E-2 investment. It would likely be seen as substantial since it was more than I needed to establish the business. Also, this amount would have been sufficient to demonstrate my commitment to the business and support the likelihood that I would succeed. The second reason why I would not have qualified for the E-2 visa is that my business wasn't real and operating for several months after it was formed. Initially, I created a website and slowly started to implement some marketing strategies. I didn't actually expect to have clients for at least a couple of months. This was fine by me since I wanted to take things slowly in order to understand every aspect of my business and be deliberate about the types of cases I would handle. If you're attempting to qualify for an E-2 visa, you may not have this luxury since you must be in a position to show that your business is a real and operating commercial enterprise at the time that you apply. In order to meet this requirement, I would have had everything established prior to making the application. The website would have been live. The office would have been set up. Social media accounts would be in place. The logo and branding would have been completed, etc. Having these tasks completed would have put me in a much better position to show that my business was ready to begin operations. The third reason why I would have failed is that I wasn't planning to create jobs. In order to qualify for the E-2 visa, your business can't be marginal, which essentially means that your business must create jobs. I launched without any specific personnel projections. In fact, my unwritten informal plan, if you can call it that, was to leverage technology and paralegal services so that I would not need to hire any permanent employees in the foreseeable future. In my opinion, this is a rational plan. But again, if you're seeking an E-2 visa, such a plan would likely result in a denial on the basis that your business is marginal. If I were applying for the E-2 visa, I would have a solid business plan that projects revenue, expenses, and personnel that the business would require over the next 5 years. My goal would be to grow my client base quickly so that I could get to the point where I would need at least 3 full-time or 6 part-time employees by the end of the 5th year of operations. So to summarize all of this, when I opened my business, I had the freedom to decide how to start. I didn't have to spend much. However, as someone who's starting a business in the hopes that you will get an E-2 visa, you may have to make some compromises. You may have to spend more and project more jobs than you initially anticipated. This is unfortunate, but if you can structure the business in a way that makes sense from a business perspective and an E-2 perspective, then the E-2 visa may still be the best vehicle that allows you to build a profitable and successful business in the United States. I hope this information was helpful. If you did enjoy this video, please like it or pass it along to someone who may benefit from it. Thanks for your time.